Hey everyone, it's Michael Zapersky here, and today I'm very excited to have Stuart Leo join us. Stuart, welcome.
Michael, a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me on the Consulting Success podcast.
Yeah, glad to have you on. So, Stuart, for those who aren't familiar with you and your work, you are an entrepreneur. You're the founder. You have a podcast, and also the CEO of Waymaker.io, an intelligent business management platform that helps leaders get more done. Prior to that, you have 15 years of experience in consulting, leadership management, and strategy. And I definitely want to get into how we can help consultants and how consultants can really be able to manage and exceed their goals for 2022 and beyond. Before we do that, let's go back into time and kind of give us a glimpse into the early stages of your career. Like, what did you study? And then what was your first kind of venture into the world of work or business?
Wow, that's definitely going back in time, and I'm old enough to say that that's actually going back to last century, which sounds extraordinarily scary in the 21st century. So what did I study? I actually started off studying a double degree in hotel management and business commerce, and I loved travel. I loved adventure. I loved hotels, and I probably imagined myself running some boutique, exclusive hotel in the Swiss Alps somewhere in life. As life took me on a journey, I realized that I really valued my holidays, and I steered away from working in the hospitality industry to enjoying the hospitality industry. And that meant I doubled down and focused on my business degree. So I ended up doing a commerce degree. I studied commerce, majored in marketing, ended up graduating in 1999. There we go. And my actual first job post-university was actually a tiny little startup I did with a mate at university. So I guess there was a little bit of entrepreneurialism back in the blood way back then. And he was a IT student at the same university. I was business and marketing, and we got together and we just started a tiny little startup in the very first .com boom.
Right.
Back in 1999, and it was a small site. We had what was actually an innovative little business model at the time, where we sold advertising space for job ads to hospitals. So hospitals needed to recruit nurses and staff and whatever, and we just came up with a clever little subscription model that said, based on the number of beds you have in the hospital, this is your rate per year. And now you can just go ahead and place as many job ads as you like. And you know what? When I think back on it, it was far more innovative and interesting than I really gave it credit for at the time. And we did that for about a year until that first .com bubble burst. And
Right.
I don't know if you can remember back in time to when that happened, but .coms it's kind of like what Bitcoin is today, I guess. It was just that new thing that money was just flowing to. And look, we were a tiny little business, two boys on the beach in their parents' attics and garages, trying to do a tiny little startup. It was just as basic as you could imagine. But the bottom fell out of that market, and we got to the point after about 12 months, which was a great learning experience, going, do we actually take on some investment and run this thing and see where we go, or do we actually go and get some real jobs and actually figure out how to do this thing called work? And that's not a bad question to ask, because we actually said, let's go get real jobs. And strangely enough, when we walked into our first jobs, we didn't go through the traditional job interviews or anything like that. We walked into somebody going, hey, you should meet the CEO of this because they're looking for people like you. And before I knew it, I was in a job in an agency in Brisbane, what was then the new media agency, and working on digital strategies for companies, and at the bottom of the food chain, but in the game. I did that for a few years. And before I ended up in corporate life, and I could stop there, but in fact, I will stop there because you may want to drill into some other areas.
Yeah, no. So it sounds like you went from university to a year or so running your own small startup, then got into the corporate life, and then after a while, decided that you wanted to start your own consulting related business, which was business transformation. Talk me through just a little bit of why did you decide to leave corporate life after being in it for a period of time? Why not just kind of continue climbing the ladder and moving higher up in the ranks, and have that corporate career? Why did you decide to go off and start your own business again?
That is a really good question, because corporate life is wonderful. I had a great experience in corporate life. I worked for a great company, a multinational. We got to spend a lot of money doing a lot of great things. I was in urban redevelopment and master planning large scale communities. And I worked in sales and marketing and product development and management strategy. And it was just exciting. It was amazing. And, it was really a learning ground to see how certain parts of the world worked. And there's no greater, training ground to meet and grow. And so I loved that. But to get to your question, why would a young 30-something who's just, married, first child on the way, or I think we'd had our first child, decide, and it was, I think, around the time of the GFC, to throw away a perfectly good career earning hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in a booming industry, throw that away to go and be a consultant. And I think I always had that niggling inside to go and do something for yourself, to not be a passenger on a train, but to go and build a train. And that's hard to get rid of. There was some other circumstances as well that probably helped catalyze that. Because I think you can build wonderful careers working for yourself, or you can build wonderful careers working for others. There's no right or wrong, but there are better fits for individuals. And I certainly found that I was staring down the barrel of 10 or 20 years, my nightmare was waking up in 10 years' time with, some BMWs in the garage and no life.
Right.
And
Stuart, how long were you in that position where you saw the possibility or the potential to go off and start your own thing again, and actually pulling the trigger and deciding to make the leap and to move forward?
Yeah, good question. I didn't rush it. I was in a role that took me to lots of different places. So the role I was in the corporation meant that I would travel to lots of different project sites and work with lots of different people. And so I was on the road constantly, and that gives you a lot of thinking time. And so I was actually able to sit and think about it and process it. And I reckon it was about a year of thinking it through and just trying to wrestle with it and talk with other people, my wife and good friends and mentors. And then really the catalyst was when I saw the company restructuring and doing a whole bunch of stuff. Naively, now's my time to jump. I mean, that was probably a little bit naive, to be honest. I should have hung around and potentially waited until life outside in the real bad world in the GFC wasn't so bad. But they're the lessons you learn along the way. And so I took that moment to go, well, look, man, do I want to spend the next few years in here in turmoil, or is in turmoil the best time to jump and seize some opportunities? And so being the opportunistic, idealist, optimist that I am, and stubborn idiot sometimes, I jumped. And to be honest, that jump was really simple. It was saying to my boss, thank you for the opportunity and what you're putting in front of me. I don't really like it. I think I can forge my own way forward doing this, which was met with, you're insane. which is normal. That's okay.
Sure.
And to be honest, then it was really practical. I as soon as I'd said that, and I'd said that to a few friends, I actually landed my first client.
But
rather
before we get to that, Stuart, and because I definitely want to explore how you got your first client and subsequent clients, um, you then spent about 9 years or maybe even more building this consulting business, and more recently you've transitioned to building a business that is all around software. So I want to get to how you did that. I think a lot of people are interested in the idea of productization. And in fact, we just did a workshop at Consulting Success recently about productization of consulting services that was very popular. It sold out. So I think there's a lot of interest around this. But before we do that, so to tell me about that transition of going from having a corporate job, saying, I'm out of here, and starting your own thing. You said that you landed a client almost right away. How did you land that first client?
To be honest, it's not what you know, but who you know sometimes. And in that instance, a friend of a friend. And they said, well, look, hey, I'm going off doing this. I need this kind of person who can help do some strategy, some research, some marketing. I'm like, hey, that's me. I can do that.
But how did that happen, Stuart? Did you send out an email to the people that you knew when you were leaving? Were you at a barbecue, having a beer, and a conversation came up? Like, walk us through. I want the details of how did you actually get that first client?
I think you're making me think now about the detail. That's difficult. I think I was sitting down having a coffee with one of my best mates, and who I still work with to this day. And I said, I'm going to go do this. And he said, well, you know what? Blah, blah, blah is doing that. Let's meet. And he set up the meeting.
Gotcha.
And so it was a referral. Yeah, it was a referral straight away. I didn't have a website. I didn't have a business name. I didn't have anything. All I had was me, what I did, and my experience, which, is pretty much what any consultant has at the end of the day. You take away all the fluff and bubble, that's what people are buying.
And so talk me through that your next kind of, client number 2 or number 3, like aside from that initial coffee introduction referral, how did you start getting business? Where did the majority of the initial clients come from in your new consulting business when you started many years ago?
Yeah. So most of them were referral. In fact, I would say 90% were referral. And it was a case of doing some work, demonstrating that work, getting a referral to somebody else, or picking up the phone and talking to the network of people that I knew. And
take me through that in a little bit more detail, because very often people will say, yeah, most of my business has come from referrals. Yet their approach is very inactive. It's referrals come to them, great, but they don't actually have a strategy behind it. Was that also your case, where you just did great work, provided value, and people contacted you, or were you taking proactive steps to request referrals, or it sounds like you had some strategy that you were working through?
Yeah. When you say referrals, most people think, oh, lucky you just sat there and the business came to you. No, that's just utter BS. You know what? That so rarely happens, and anybody telling you that does, that's not true. There's other stuff going on in the background.
Tell me, what did you do that worked best for you?
Yeah. So, here's what I did. And by the way, I'm not a natural salesperson. Which sounds a bit weird because I work in sales and marketing, and at that time had come out of that space. I actually struggled to have the confidence to pick up the phone and talk to somebody, or to send a letter or an email. But the basic motivation of and I don't even know who said it, was probably some and I hate that I'm quoting Anthony Robbins in the very first the very first quote I'm giving you, but it was probably some Anthony Robbins quote that says, action creates reaction that generates momentum. And so your business world of referrals is like a bucket. And when a bucket's still, all the sand or the rocks in the bucket just float to the bottom and they do nothing. But if you grab a big spoon or something and stir that bucket up and start shaking it up and move it around, then stuff starts hitting into each other, or it starts, and you get a bit of momentum. It starts creating a bit of a whirlpool. It starts building some energy and some action and some momentum. And so I had just resolved to try and pick up the phone and ring at least 10 people a day. I never really did that. I probably got 2 or 3 or 4, sometimes only 1. But, picking up the phone and ringing somebody and just saying, hey, how you going? What are you doing? What are you up to? What's working? What's not? Something might drop out of that conversation to say, actually, yeah, we're looking for X. Hey, why don't you put a prop forward? Or, hey, I was just chatting with blah, blah, blah the other day. They're looking for this. Why don't I do a quick intro for you? Boom, there's your referral.
And so who are the people that you were calling? Were these people that you already had an existing relationship with, or what was the connection?
Look, to be honest, people I had an existing relationship with, but they're not best friends. They might be somebody that I worked maybe once with 4 years ago.
Right.
But people that you could pick up the phone and say, hey, remember me? Remember we did this together? What are you doing now? Tell me, if you're interested in them,
yeah,
they're going to be interested in you. It's that classic old saying of, if you want to have friends, be friendly. It's not rocket science, but there is a science to it. And so it really was a case of picking up the phone, talking to people, trying to get that momentum moving, getting work in. And look, in the early days, look, to be honest, when I first started my first consulting business, we did very little strategy around it, even though we were consulting in business and brand and strategy. And we would take on lots of different types of work. I was still in that formation phase of going, okay, what should I do? I can do lots of things. And see, that's actually one of the things coming out of corporate life. I was a general manager, and general manager means exactly that. You can genuinely do and oversee most things across a broad spectrum of activities, but you're rarely the expert in one. And if you're good, you can generally do those things quite well, which means you can actually do a broad range of services, which is actually sometimes a negative for you out there in the consulting business, because you take on lots of different types of work. At some point, you've got to choose to narrow that focus. So in those early days, it was talking to people. If somebody wanted some consumer research, I'd do it. If somebody wanted some brand work, I'd do it. If somebody wanted some sales process or customer journey work, I'd do it. It was a case of sitting there and earning my way to understand how to build this consulting business. It was very fluid in the early days.
Right.
I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. So and then you ran that business for about 9 years, and then recently, decided to, again, almost after a decade, to shift into software. Talk me through that decision. Why not just continue running your consulting business, growing that business? Why shift into a completely kind of different business model?
Well, in order to answer that, I will go back. Interestingly, I was running the consulting business for about 18 months and had actually gone through the first year, made good money, was doing all right, actually. And the corporation that I used to work for picked up the phone and went, hey, we're looking for this person, come in and work on this exec role. This is a great opportunity. And I actually wound down my consulting business to go and do that, which was a really interesting decision. And so I told all my clients, hey, I'm winding down, I'm going back into corporate life, I'm going to go do this. And that was both wonderful and extraordinarily painful. I think once the bird flies the nest, it's very difficult to get that same bird back in that same nest. And so after about 12 months, I remember sitting down with my CEO going, I think you're going to kill me or I'm going to kill you. This is not where I need to be. And I'm not aligned to where you're going. I don't think you're aligned to where I'm going. This is not great. And so I packed up and walked away again after about 2 years. And that was a great learning experience for me, to learn what it's like to step back into the comfort zone once you've made that first leap, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I saw that you made that transition from running your, being corporate life to running your own thing to going back into corporate life and then going back to, I think that's where that 9-year stint, kind of the most recent 9 years of dedicated time working in your consulting business. But I guess what I'm really interested to hear is when that's working for you and it's not like you've just been doing it for a year or two, trying to make it work and not having success. You're doing it for almost a decade or doing it again for almost a decade. What was going on in your mind telling you, okay, now we're here 2021 or so, I want to now shift the model from services to more of software as a service?
Yeah. Well, I think every organization has seasons. And my gut is they're around about 7 years each. I think you go through 7-year seasons. Don't know why. I just think it's just what it is. And it was around year 7 or 8 that I was starting to go, what's the next season look like? And it was some of that thinking had really started in years 5 or 6. We'd started to play with building some little products. We'd grown our business transformation service. We were a team of, 15, sometimes up to about 20 people. Like, it was a decent sized consulting business, millions of dollars a year coming through the business. And one of the things we had done was we had started to partner. This is going back in 2012, 13, 14. We had started to partner with technology companies in that sales and marketing space. So marketing automation and sales automation. And that was back in the early days of that industry. And that was really interesting. And it helped us understand the power of product, and also the benefit of productization. And by about year 7 or 8, we had, we must have partnered with 7 or 8 different technology groups. And that's really common today. If you're in business transformation, you're partnering with the Adobes and the Marketos and the Salesforces and the Microsofts and the whoever's. And we were the first to actually partner with some of those organizations here in this country, some of the smaller ones at least anyway. In fact, I remember back in 2012, 13, 14, people like HubSpot ringing us up going, you've got to become a partner and do this and do that. I had no idea what that meant, by the way. And I wasn't a technology background. We really built. But what we learned was the power of product. And we learned the power of systemization. We learned the power of repeatable work. We also learned the shortcomings of product. And
can you maybe, Stuart, I think it'd be really helpful if you could just outline very briefly, what have you experienced or found is the benefit of product or productization, and then any downsides or challenges as well in comparing kind of a productized model to a service-based model?
Yeah, well, the completely different business models. And that's, I think, if you're thinking about productization, you just need to hear right now that if you want to go and build product, you either need to A, blow up your existing services business, or B, choose to be blown up. This isn't a mutual experience. You are either a product company or a service company, and don't try and confuse the two. And look, to be honest, that was one of the mistakes we made in our consulting business that we learned too late. And we were a great services business. And then we started playing with building our own product. And to be honest, we spent way too much time, way too much money It started to impact our traditional service models. And we realized, and as I started to talk to other people who had gone through the journey, I remember meeting some people in San Francisco and sitting down and listening to them talk. And you know, they were telling my story. They were going, oh yeah, we're a consulting business doing this, and this, maybe $2 or $3 million a year in services. We played around with product, but really we'd started to suck at everything because we were trying to do this broad cross-section of services. And it wasn't until we made the bold decision to go one way that things started to work. And right. So, you know, you have to choose. You cannot be a professional athlete and a professional hot dog eater. No offense to professional hot dog eaters out there. They're just two different business models. And you know, it's the same with services and product. So we played around with some products. We were playing with some products. We were having some isolated success with product. And we hit this junction point. And to be honest, and this is in our business transformation consulting business, and it was pretty brutal. It was over a period of about 1 to 2 years, I was going, the business I'm running today is not necessarily the business I started back in 2019.
What was the big difference? What was kind of rubbing you the wrong way, or what was the feeling that you were having, and what was causing it?
When you're a services provider, you partner with clients. You build intimate relationships with clients, and you take clients on a journey, and they take you on a journey. And that journey is helping that client achieve, you know, that business growth. And when, or rather if, your business is just in the business of turning on technology, then you just become a churn and burn. And you're not really interested in the successful outcomes of the business. You're just interested in get that implemented, get that started, get on to the next thing. And we had this situation inside our consulting business where we had a small number, maybe 3, 4, or 5 really intimate, high value consulting engagements, and then maybe churning 30, 40, 50 clients a year in these technology environments. And then we had these products that were also, and we realized we were running about 5 different businesses in one. And that's like grinding your gears at every movement. Yeah. So it was a really interesting moment. And so, you know, I knew we had to step back. I knew we had to go through a big reinvention. It took, to be honest, a couple of years to build up to that. And it was really interesting. I got to the point where my wife and I, we were looking at the business, and we had actually figured out this other business to go and do. This is back in 2018, early 19. And we were like, we're going to go and do this. There's a market opportunity over there, but that probably means winding down our consulting business. And we're like, that's okay with that. And I called up a friend, a mentor, or somebody I highly respected who's in that space of helping organizations merge, acquire, end, whatever you like. And by the way, we had had a number of conversations by this stage with investment bankers and people ringing us up going, we want to buy you and roll you up with that. And, you know, so do all these things. We're at that stage of either be bought, be broke, or do something else. You know, it was one of those really interesting moments. And I said to him, hey, I've got business A, this is my existing business, consulting business. And I've got business B, which is a business plan and a business model and a market opportunity. And I think we want to be doing business B, but we've got this 10-year plus business A sitting over here that's just, you can't just turn off, you know, you've got to do something with that. I said, how do I get from business A to business B? And he said, all right. And he's a very, very clever man. And he sat with me and with my wife over the period of about 3 months. And by about, it wasn't too long into the conversation, a number of sessions we'd had with him, he looked at me and he, Stu, when you stand up and talk about business A and what it does, there's something in you that turns on, the light goes on. When you talk about business B, which, yeah, you could make a ton of money and do it, you know, you're kind of cold. Like it's it's just
and
like
business
you
B
can
is
do it.
the new concept, or that's the existing?
Business B, I'm not even going to name or use. It doesn't even exist anymore. It was
Got
the
you.
thing we were going to do.
Okay.
And he said, Stu, you really need to be doing business A, but maybe you just haven't got the business model right on business A yet. But what you're doing in business A is where your heart's desires lie. And I, you know, that resonated with me because I love that old Voltaire quote where it's, and I won't do it justice, but you know, wherever the world's problems lie and wherever your heart's deepest longings lie, then that is where you'll find meaning and purpose. You know, so wherever there's deep problems to solve and a deep longing and passion, align those, and you'll find meaning and purpose, and hopefully profits as well at the same time if you do it well. And so that was actually not the answer I wanted. I really wanted him to go, hey, I really love business B. Let's go, you know, spin that business up, raise some money, go ahead and conquer the world. And we'll just sweep all the problems in business A under the carpet and close that chapter, and life will be peachy. And instead he goes, actually, Stu, I think your meaning and purpose is found in some of the things you're doing in business A, not in business B. And I knew he was right. In my heart of hearts, I knew he was right. And I knew that I was just wanting to kind of find the easy road, if I could put it like that. So I turned around, sat down. I'm like, all right, so what are we going to do? Because I feel like we've got to face the monster, this monster we've created. I'm being very intimate on this podcast, and I'm probably going to get into trouble with some people on things I say. And so look, that started a very painful journey. I knew from past experience that if we wanted to do a product-based business and make that transition from product, we had to go through some significant pain. We had to go right back to the beginning and start again. I also knew that the kind of product business we wanted to do, that all the IP and the brains of that new product business was inside my existing consulting business.
Right.
And
can I ask you specifically, you have this business that, as you're saying, is generating, millions a year in revenue. You have a sizable team of 15 to 20 people. What happened to your existing clients? What happened to your existing employees? Can you walk us through the different pieces and what changes you had to make to go from a service-based business to now potentially a small starting point for a product-based business?
Yeah, that's painful. So thanks for bringing up the pain of the past.
That's what I'm here to do.
We knew we had to wind down, which is a horrible thing to do in a business. Most business people think that winding up is the only thing you should ever do. Winding down is a negative, but actually, you got to think about business like fields in a harvest, fields in a farm. So, sometimes you harvest, sometimes you sow, sometimes you move that crop from one field to another crop so that the earth regenerates and it gets different minerals and nutrients. And sometimes you wind up, sometimes you wind down. That's the seasons of life, and you shouldn't be afraid of that. We went into our winter of wind down, and we knew that we were not going to pursue new certain types of projects, so we started going slow on those. We had to stop investing in certain partnerships that we were in, which we knew were just ultimately going to seize up and stop. That was all okay. And as those projects wound down, we didn't replace staff.
Right. Did you call up any clients and have to tell them, hey, we're not going to be able to continue, or do you just work through every project you had until it came to that natural end?
What was really, some clients, we just said, hey, we're not going to take on that work. We'd either just say, no, we're not going to do it, or hey, if we're going to do it, it's going to cost an extra zero, right, and just price ourselves out of that market. Other clients, and this was the other thing that was happening at the same time. Some of the other clients had been saying to us, actually, we don't really want you to do some of that stuff, but we want you and your team to be over what our business is doing in that area. And that was really interesting. That was this weird, I had clients sit me down and say, Stu, hey, I want you, and this person and that person working on our business, but actually we don't want you doing that stuff. But we want those people in your business who have been doing that stuff for other people to help us make sure that the people we hire do that really well. And that was a really weird position to be in. And so what we found was that a small number of our clients, 4 or 5 of our clients, were saying to me and some of the key leaders in our team, actually, we want your advisory, not your coaching or consulting.
Right.
And that was a significant learning point. And I'm like,
was that something that you accepted and embraced during that transition, or did you say no to those opportunities?
No, that was something we said yes to.
Right. Okay. So you went from really doing hands-on consulting, implementation support work to more advisory work. And would you say, is that what helped you to bridge the gap between running a full-blown consulting services based business and at the same time then transitioning to working on the product business? Did that help with cash flow during that time?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely it did. Because a number of clients said, actually, we just want you to do this, this, and this, and we're going to pay you pretty much the same amount of money to just bring the advisory and the oversight as opposed to doing it as well.
Right.
And we're like, come again? So that was actually probably the biggest learning insight in the consulting journey. And I put it like this, and this is really very much the proposition we have with the software. When you start out in consulting, you do a broad range of things, and the way you grow is to find your niche. Most consultants have this broad array of services that helps them capture lots of fish. They can eat and they can capture lots of those small fish and eat and get moving and get going. And over time, they go, well, I want to stop catching lots of small fish, and I prefer just to catch, 1 or 2 big fish. And the way you do that is by starting to niche. You've got to niche in, you've got to become an expert. And so you've got to move from that generalist, that good, into great, that expert. And that's the journey most coaches and consultants go on. But the problem with that is that you often end up in a gig to gig world. There's a third step to make, and I didn't know this, and I don't think most consultants know this. You've actually got to make the step from expert to advisor. And when you make that step from expert to advisor, you're actually going back and drawing on all of those general skills, the broad cross-section of skills across the organization, and moving those from good to great again, but not in the doing, but in the execution of. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it totally does. I think it's something that a lot of people might want to do earlier on, but if you haven't proven yourself, if you haven't, delivered enough value or have enough recognition, it can be challenging to get from start to advisory work, right? You have to put in some of the work and some of that experience and expertise to get to the point where clients are actually seeking just your advice as opposed to you doing the implementation work for them.
Correct. Yeah, it's almost akin in the corporate sense when a lot of graduates join corporates, and they tend not to do this so much anymore, but the good organizations do this. They'll take a graduate and they'll say, we want you to work with us for a decent amount of time, which means for the first year or two, you're actually going to work across sales and marketing and finance, operations and product and R&D. And you're getting this general learning of the organization. And then you might land in finance or strategy or ops or product or R&D or whatever it might be. And you end up doing a series of stints in those specialist areas. But you're actually moving through the organization because they're so big in different roles over the years, ultimately landing in some kind of executive role. But you know the guys in finance because you ended up doing 3 years there, or you know the guys in product because you had spent some time there. And you've moved from, it's kind of the same journey. You've got to be able to move through the different parts of the organization and understand how the organization works, both from the leadership and the strategy and the technology and the operations and the product, And then you've got to be able to bring those threads together and help leaders and leadership teams transform them. And so that was a really interesting insight.
And Stuart, before I want to ask just a couple more questions before we wrap up here, and just be conscious of and respect your time. When you look at, so you have the experience now of running a full-blown consulting business. You have the experience of building out this productized software, offering and business. When you look at the marketing of what you've seen work really well in services, as opposed to marketing in the product world, are there a lot of similarities? Have you found big differences in terms of what works from a marketing perspective? You mentioned with the consulting, a lot was based on referrals and you being very active and reaching out to people and doing great work. What are you finding right now as you're, still in the relatively early stages of building out the software product? Where is your focus around marketing today?
Yeah. I think the principles are the same. So, what's your value proposition? Why different? What problem do you solve? All these principles are the same. You can't get away from those. The execution of those principles are different. So, it really comes down to how you answer those specific questions. In fact, I'm going to be a little bit self-promotion here because I'm going to talk a little bit about our product. Our product is a software platform that helps businesses diagnose, plan, and deliver. But it's built off 7 questions, and those 7 questions came from a lesson we learned from the British military, and we started working on these questions in our consulting business 10 years ago, because the insight we gleaned from the British military, and I hope you give me the indulgence just to go for 2 minutes into this. When they were struggling moving from the Cold War to the Hot War, from the 20th century to the 21st century, from a traditional world to a non-traditional world, their decision-making and their strategic planning and their leadership practices weren't functioning correctly. Their old ways didn't fit the new way. And the way they solved that was going back to core principles. And the way they solved it was saying, actually, the best way to build a battle plan is to ask and answer 7 questions. And if you just ask and answer these 7 questions, you will develop the highest and best course of action to meet the objective. And it doesn't matter what battle you're in. It doesn't matter whether you're air, sea, land, intelligence, whatever, special forces. These are the 7 questions to ask. And so that was actually something that I learned about in 2009, 10, 11, 12. And I spent 10 years saying, well, if the military can only ask 7 questions in any kind of battle, in anywhere in the world, in any geography, in any kind of warfare, with any kind of part of the army, why can't a business just ask 7 questions? And what would those 7 questions be, or a small set of questions at the time? How do we take that out of the British military and put it inside the boardroom of a small business or even a big business? And so this is a long way of answering your question. I believe that there's actually only 7 questions you need to ask and answer, and that's what we did with our clients. That's what actually helped us move from good and expert to advisor, and was the process of asking these questions. And so for about 10 years, I and my team were refining these questions, and until such time as we got to the point where, just like the British military, when we were asking and answering these questions, when the military answer it, they also have a piece of software in their hands that's helping them answer really hard questions really effectively with great intelligence. And the reason why we built a product business was because we built that software. We went, if you're going to ask and answer these 7 questions in the heat of battle to figure out where to go, what to do, and build the most valuable course of action, you need some software in your hands. And we were doing that manually for about 10 years. We turned around and went, we're going to build that software. So when you ask me the question, hey, what are you doing and what's different? Well, actually, when we were running a services business and generating millions of dollars a year, we were asking the same questions. When we were advising a publicly listed organization generating billions of dollars of revenue a year, we were asking the same 7 questions. When we were working with a startup and helping them get their first revenue, we were asking the same 7 questions.
And Stuart, are these the same questions? Like, have you changed? I know there's a lot of writing about the 7 questions online, right? You know, what is the situation? How does it affect me? What have I been told to do and why? What effects do I need to achieve? And what direction must I give to? So I'm seeing these online right now as we're speaking. Have you altered or changed these questions?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. We're like, hey, British military, your 7 questions are amazing. If you want to blow something up, then answer the British military's questions. If you want to build something up and build an organization, you need a different set of questions. All we took from the British military was the principle of asking the questions, and could a small number of questions create the transformation required if asked and answered on a continuous basis. And so we rewrote those 7 questions, which anybody can get. Here's the shameless self-promotion, go to waymaker.io, go to the Learn tab and look at Waymaker's leadership curve. It's got the 7 questions on it. Gotcha. And those 7 questions take you around 7 areas of the organization: clarity of vision, clarity of market focus, clarity of strategy, clarity of business model, clarity of customer experience, which includes sales, marketing, service, clarity of the employee experience. And then lastly, the question of action, clarity of goals. What are the 1, 2, or 3 things that, if delivered, shift the needle on the organization? And what sits behind that is a piece of software that, when you ask and answer those 7 questions, we've mapped about 250 odd data points of an organization, and how your team answer that diagnostic in 5 to 15 minutes is going to tell you where the weaknesses and strengths are and where the gaps are, so that when you answer the questions, your answers are unique to your situation, your customer, your marketplace, your business, which might mean that if you're a product business, you need to be doing X, Y, Z. If you're a consultant specializing in business sustainability, you need to be doing A, B, C. And if you're a consultant advising on creative marketing, then do EFG. There's no one size fits all answer, but I believe there is some core questions that every organization should ask.
And then I want to make sure that I don't leave people hanging. So before we wrap up, Stuart, when you look at the marketing that you're doing right now, what would you say is working most effectively for you with the productized software business?
Yeah, great. To be honest, the most effective marketing we're doing right now uses a combination of clear value proposition, direct outreach using some smart AI, some smart customer journey management that does all the heavy lifting for us, and surfaces leads into our inbox of people going, yeah, I'm interested. I think I need this. I have the problem that you're solving. Help me use the product.
Is this done through email or through LinkedIn? How are you actually contacting these people?
Yeah, to be honest, it's a combination of all the above. There's no one platform that does everything, but it's a combination of LinkedIn, retargeting, database outreach. To be honest, it's about identifying who you serve, being clear around the problem they face, and then having simple messaging. And look, we're still junior, young at this game. I'm not pretending to be genius. Just for context for listeners, we're 6 months into our product journey.
Right.
We're still a startup in this space. But our second quarter compared to our first quarter was about 10,000% improved. And we went from doing maybe 1 or 2 business diagnostics a week to I think in November we did over 60 or 70. It was starting to ramp up, and we now have partners in the UK and Australia, and talking to our first in North America, and we're in that starting world. but it's a combination of knowing who, where they are, what problem they face, and presenting a clear value proposition, and then using smart technology and customer journey management to take them on a journey to ultimately say, hey, talk to me. I don't know if I can be more explicit than that. Does that answer your question?
Well, that's good. And we'll wrap up here. There's so much more that we could dive into and explore, but again, I want to respect your time, Stuart, that we have here for today. So thank you so much for coming on. We'll make sure that everyone can learn. We'll have all this kind of linked up in the show notes as well, waymaker.io, where you can learn more. And those 7 questions, highly recommend that people check those out. So Stuart, thanks again so much for coming on.
Michael, a pleasure. I wish you all the best and great success to you and your consulting community.
Thank you.